Hey guys, Desolator Magic here, and you might have thought that there's no possible way that there's any more mistakes that you might be making in an MTG game, but it's time for part 18 of my famous series. This one's really simple, but I've seen so many experienced players make this mistake that I just cannot let it slide. And it's really pretty simple. Don't assume you lost just because you had to mulligan twice. Now, of course, if you're playing in Modern and you mulligan twice, you just lost the game. Congratulations, Modern sucks. But in Standard, the games go a heck of a lot longer, so having like an effective 1 to 2 turn disadvantage, depending upon what you actually start with, it's really not the biggest deal in the world. I mean, it's still very winnable. I've lost to plenty of people mulliganing down to 5, especially with the new Scry rule. Without that, you'd really be in trouble. So let's say you're going second, and you start the game with 7, you're good, 7 cards are golden, it's at least an acceptable opening hand, you've got most of the cards you need. There's probably 1 or 2 cards that are like redundant, or you've got, one really big high cost that you don't immediately need, maybe 2, maybe you started with like 4 lands. I mean, it's probably not perfect, so people get hung up on, oh, it's 7 cards, I have to start with 7, if I start with less than 7, I'm in trouble. Well, would you rather start with 7, pretty good cards with a couple you don't need, or 6 absolutely perfect cards, like exactly what you need, like 3 lands and a 1, 2, and a 3 cost? That's a better start. So anyway, let's say you're going second. Well, if you kept the 7 and then pulled the 8th, you're still stuck with 1 or 2 cards that you probably don't really need until later. Or like 3 kill spells and almost no creatures. It's never perfect. So maybe the 8th card helped, maybe it didn't, but you're already on your way and you've already got what you need to at least start the game. And then you're probably going to have like 7 to 10 more pulls at least. I mean, the average Standard game, that's about how many turns you take. So that actually exceeds your opening hand in the first place. And the late game pulls oftentimes determine who wins. So let's go down to my other example. If you mulligan once and then you start with 6 cards and then scry 1, you practically didn't even lose anything. I mean, it's totally not a big deal, but people just get crushed when they have to mulligan down to 5. Now, if you had to mulligan to 5 and it's still a bad opening hand, you probably should have mulliganed to 4. You have to consider your probability of pulling something better versus the probability of pulling your way out of the problem that you have. So that you have to consider that. It's not always a given. But hey, if you've got 5 lands or something, something just absurd like that, you just removed most of the lands from your deck, or not most as in majority, but a ton of them. So your probability of pulling something else went through the roof. But let's say, you got 2 lands, 3 normal cards, spells, creatures, whatever. Including the scry to get rid of another card you don't need, you're good. I mean, that's almost like starting with 6, sort of. I mean, it's not as good as truly starting with it in your hand. You're still 1 entire draw behind, but it's more about what you draw than how many cards you draw. Because you can draw all the cards you want, and if they're not what you need, it's just not going to work. Like, if it's turn 12 and you pull a land, you probably don't need that. That's just a dead card, you might as well have skipped it. So saying, oh, I drew more cards than you, yay, that's not how you win the game. So starting with less cards, as long as they're the right cards, you're good. If you had to keep a 1-land hand and, the 4 spells are at least reasonably cheap, like 1, 2, and maybe 3 cost, you'll probably pull your way out of that in a reasonable amount of time. So you at least have a chance, and you have no idea if the other person has 4 ideal cards and 3 really crappy cards. And like I said, if you're going second, you get the draw, and they sort of start the game a card down, I mean, compared to you. Well, except for the fact that you're basically starting the game with 5 plus the 1 you draw, but, effectively they're not starting with 7 perfect cards. So if you've got 5 moderately good cards, you're almost on the same footing as them, and people act like it's just the end of the world, and so who cares about, like, the mental state? I'm not here to give you encouragement and yay, go you, let's make a self-help tape. This is detrimental simply because people will play differently if they think they're going to lose. They'll just like, oh, I'm going to chump block, whatever, I'm going to lose anyway. Oh, I'll block your I don't know, 1-3 with my 3-1 and trade, even though that's idiotic, because, oh, I already lost. I don't need my 3-1. I already lost. Let's get to the next game. No, play the game out at absolute maximum strategy, maximum effort, because you stand a pretty good chance of winning in the long run. Now, the one exception I can think of, besides Modern, is a combo deck. If you're running a combo deck and you mulled the 5 and you still don't have most of the combo, like you have 1 card out of 3 or something, yeah, you're going to lose. That's why you really shouldn't play those. They're just stupid and gimmicky, and if they don't go off, you usually lose. I mean, it's just dumb to play a combo deck. Any other deck that just steadily does normal Magic stuff, you're good to go with 5 cards, trust me. Now in Modern, it's so competitive and so precise, you probably lost if you started with 5, just solely based on the fact that you started with 5. Unless they're holding 5 good cards and 2 just utterly useless, like 9 or 10 costs that are supposed to like go to the graveyard or something. Anything other than that case, yeah, you probably lost, so whatever, but still don't play differently. I mean, you never know. Even though the odds are severely against you in Modern, do not play differently. Still at least try. Now, there is one exception to even that. If you know that your opponent has no idea what you're doing or what you're playing, what's in your deck, then you may want to forfeit early just to prevent them from seeing what's in your deck. And that's only if your deck is like really secretive or takes advantage of them not knowing what's in it. Like, people see my prowess deck and they're like, oh, this might be red burn, this might be maybe red-green werewolves with some weird, stuff in it. And then I swing on turn 4 and they're like, oh, I'll let the 1/3 through. Oh, look, 28 damage. Oops. I wish I knew it was a prowess double strike super boost ambush deck. So if I started with like 4 or 5 cards from Mulliganning and I knew that I didn't have 20 damage worth of cards, I would, pull them and just kind of stay reserved. I wouldn't, go for that 8 damage and let them know, hey, I've got a +3 and I've got, a couple prowess guys. That's what my deck does, because that's such a disadvantage. I would just start throwing out creatures, and they'd probably notice that they had prowess, but they'd be like, why doesn't he have any boost spells? So they might not quite figure it out. So that would be the only exception where I would say, I need to keep this deck a secret. I want to show them as few cards as I possibly can, and I'll just take the loss. But you better be damn sure that you're going to win the next 2 games, because a round loss is the worst disadvantage you can have. You have to play and pull flawlessly from there on out and hope that their deck kind of falls apart, or that your deck is just more powerful, and you cannot lose another game or you lose the round. So keeping your deck a secret, it better be a pretty good secret. So hopefully that helps you out. I had one guy where he was actually so sure that he was going to lose on like turn 4 that he didn't realize. I said, you have a way to pull out of this. He was about to forfeit, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. What if you pull this or this, though? You would almost instantly win. He's like, oh, okay. So he sets half of his cards that he started picking up, sets them back down, the lands, puts them all out. Turns out, yeah, he did pull it, and he ended up beating me. I think this is a casual game or whatever, but yeah, he was like, oh, I'm scooping. This isn't worth going on. And he didn't realize that he still had a card he could pull that would win. And so that's the other thing to keep in mind. If you still have a card in your deck, even if it's a one of, you could top deck it. And I've done it. Popped up Gideon, and I'm like, oh my god, drop him in, emblem, +1, swing, I win. Just like that. It was my giant row of tokens versus his giant, giant-ish, much smaller row of flyers. So he was going to win on the next swing, and I thought, well, what can I pull? I mean, not Quarantine Field. I don't have Cryptolith out, so I can't tap my tokens for mana to exile very much. I'm totally mana screwed all game, but I've got, 7, 8 tokens on the field. Boom, +1 across the board. Ta-da, I end up winning. So definitely don't assume you lost until you know you lost, and even then you should reconsider what's in your hand, see if there's a way to stop it, double check, And from the get-go, just because you started with a lot less cards than your opponent, don't write yourself off just yet. By the way, I was watching the Packer game, of course, go Packers, and I was hanging out with my brother, and he brought my favorite adorable little niece. She just turned 3, and I just have to share this story because it's just too funny. If you haven't hung around with a 3-year-old lately, you just have to. They're more entertaining than anything ever, because they just say some crazy crap. So we had this little rabbit skin, little decorative thing, and she was like touching it and playing with it and all that, little rabbit skin blanket. She's like, oh, it's so soft. And, she's using it as a blanket and saying, oh, it's so soft, I like it, it's so fluffy. And then out of nowhere, she just like looks at it, then looks at us, and she's like, how did the rabbit die? And I was just like, try not to laugh, and I'm thinking, that just went dark. That we just went from soft and cuddly to dark, like, real quick. 3-year-olds are hilarious, so hopefully you got some family members that are 3s so you can just hang out with them and listen to all the crazy stuff they say. Also, she wanted me to let you all know that she pooped today, and you shall be very proud of her. And I think that's where I'll leave this video. I'll see you guys next video.